Today we will start the discussion about very important factor of the fermentation, which we called as process organism. As we know that the fermentation is a process of mass culturing of the organism, especially we can call as the microorganism, for the sake of any desired product. As we have discussed in our previous modules that the overall fermentation process having three major components. One is the medium, other is the total process of the fermentation, and the third and the significant factor is the organism. So organism selection and its improvement. But in this chapter we will talk about that how we can collect or select any organism, and then how we can develop that organism to meet our desired objects of fermentation, which we can say that the desired product. Microorganisms are ubiquitous in nature. Thus, the diversity of the microorganisms may be exploited by searching for strains from the natural environment able to produce the product having the commercial value. The selection of the culture to be used is the compromise between the productivity of the organism and the economic constraints of the process. As we know that, as I have already told you, that the fermentation is a process of mass culturing of any microorganism for the sake of desired product. So the overall fermentation process depends upon the culturing of the organism and how that produced any product. Bull et al. In 1979 cited a criteria as being important in the choice of any process organism. As cited by the Bull et al. 1979, the first criteria on which the process organism has to be selected, then that is the nutritional requirement of that organism or nutritional characteristics of the organism. It is frequently required that a process be carried out using a very cheap medium or a predetermined one. That is, for example, the use of methanol as an energy source. These requirements may be met by the suitable design of the isolation medium. So as concerned the first criteria, that we have to select that organism according to his nutritional requirement. As we have discussed in previous modules and chapter about the media component and media formulation and the major part of the whole fermentation process and the economics based upon that. So that's why we have to select that organism which use a very cheaper medium. As concerned the second criteria, that is the optimum temperature of the organism. So the use of an organism having an optimum temperature above 40 degrees Celsius considerably reduce the cooling cost of the large-scale fermentation, and therefore the use of such a temperature in isolation procedure may be beneficial. But here one point should be very critical, that the temperature of the organism for the growth is according to the local environment. If we take an example of the Pakistan, if we start running the fermentation process here, we have to select that organism in which we have to be less effort on the control of the temperature. So as we know that in Pakistan the most of the temperature remain above 25 degrees Celsius, so that's why we have to select those organisms which are accordingly, and then it is easy to maintain the temperature and the less cost should be involved in temperature control. So as concerned the third criteria, the reaction of the organism with the equipment to be employed and the suitability of the organism to be type of the process to be used, because sometimes the process organism and the process of the fermentation which we are using, that should be compatible. So the fourth criteria, that is the stability of the organism and its amendability to the genetic manipulation. So sometimes we select an organism and that is not stable and that loses its ability to produce any product with the passage of time. On the other hand, if we want to improve that organism that have not the tendency, any amendability to genetic manipulation, because if we want to improve that strain, then that should be on genetic basis. So that organism should have that amendability choice. So as concerned the fifth criteria, that the productivity of that organism measured in ability to convert the substrate into the product and to give a high yield of the product per unit time. So that should be a yield, a high rate of the product. The sixth and the last criteria cited by Bull et al. 1979, that is the downstreaming. So the ease of product recovery from the culture. So these are the 6 points on which we have to keep in mind while selecting the process organism. But the question is that how we get that organism who met the Bull et al. 1979 criteria. Answer is very simple, that either we have to isolate that organism, either we have to collect from the stock culture. The first stage in whole screening process of the organism for the potential industrial application is the isolation. So the isolation involves either the pure and the mixed cultures. That is also followed by the assessment of their production potential. But in some cases, it is possible to design the isolation procedure in such a way that the growth of the producers is encouraged and that they may be recognized at the isolation stage, whereas in other cases, then the organism must be isolated and producers recognized at a subsequent stages. But that whole should be carried out when the process is economical. However, before the process may be put into the commercial operation, the toxicity and the product potential of the organism has to be assessed before having the final choice of the organism.